Hi there. I've come across a request from one of my dear viewers, well, several repeated requests, to render the likeness of the Herald Ah-al-Ahim, the bright blade, right hand of the covenant of the blazing sun, which I will be happy to dive into in just a moment. If you haven't seen my content before, this series is a world-building project for a fantasy world ruled by goblins, called Gobberland. It's created by names that viewers leave in the comments section of my videos. From those names, I create a character design as well as some lore around the character, usually in the form of a few paragraphs or of a story tying them all into the same universe. For several years now, I've been building this world on TikTok, but recently I've started making long-form content on YouTube. In order to help me get my footing on here, I would really appreciate it if you could like, subscribe, or maybe even comment a name for another character for a video. When I first read this suggestion, my mind immediately went to a previous design I did back in 2022 on TikTok. The original comment that I used as the inspiration for this design was for Slanatish, the golden god of the blood-red sun. I really enjoyed the way this one turned out, and wanted to expand further into the lore for this deity, though I fear the name is a bit too close to Slanesh, which is a god of chaos from the very popular Warhammer 40k universe, and might confuse new viewers. The names of historical religious figures sometimes change over time, so I figured I might as well use a bit of a retcon here and change Slanatish to Shalnatish. And so you don't have to go all the way back in my TikTok videos to see the lore I had written for this deity. I'll include it here. So now behold Shalnatish, the golden god of the blood-red sun, resplendent in their righteous glory, a being of complete and terrifying absolutes. What curious and damned few that have glimpsed their horrible and beautiful form perish in the most gruesome of ways. Monks and priests that meditate for too long on the power of Shalnatish may at times see but a brief flash of their terrible figure. Some time later their bodies are found contorted in ultimate pain, with smoking pits where their eyes used to be. The infinite indifference of Shalnatish is a fact hard to accept for many, yet in a similar way, why would a goblin pay mind to a speck of dust that erupts from one footfall? And that is what we are. For naught would exist without them, and naught can exist without them. And at the end of days, there shall exist naught once more, all of existence obliterated by a mere wave of their fiery hand. And with my own not-so-fiery hand, I'm able to start working on this design. I imagine that Ah-al-Ahim, so-called Herald of the Sun, is an embodiment of Shalnatish of sorts, something beyond a high priest, a demigod, whose mere proximity to such a being grants a level of deity. The concept of a sun worshipper has many different connotations in my mind. Primarily though, all 4.5 of my Bronze Age loving brain cells are screaming at me to do a riff on the Berlin Gold Hat. The Berlin Gold Hat is an extremely impressive archaeological find, discovered in Germany or Switzerland. The exact origins haven't been documented, and believed to be associated with a sun-worshipping cult that was widespread throughout Central Europe. Created during the late Bronze Age, or roughly 3,000 years ago, there are actually several other gold hats that have been found, all around Germany, France, and Switzerland. They all vary in design, though they're all this same elongated conical shape. Incredibly little is known about them, and even less about the culture that created them. There are some hints in their ornamentation that they could serve as a sort of calendar that would predict lunar and solar cycles. However, very little beyond this is known. This mystery around such a fantastic and objectively cool-looking artifact has made the Berlin Gold Hat, as well as all the other gold hats found, probably my favorite archaeological find to ever exist. In fact, back in 2022, when I first found out about them, I made this little character, just trying to come up with what one of the priests of this sun cult would look like, assuming these hats were even worn like this. Obviously, this is more of a speculative creation, though still this is one of my favorite little doodles I've done. In approaching the clothing for this design, I also borrowed a lot of inspiration from the traditional clothing of the Tuareg people. a nomadic culture that inhabits a large portion of the Sahara Desert in North Africa. One of the most interesting parts of their vibrant culture is that, unlike many other cultures around the world, it is men who are obligated to wear a face veil as opposed to the women. This veil is often combined with a turban, in an article of clothing called a tagomost, or a litham in Arabic. I think they look stunning, and have been on my radar as a design element long before this character. However, as I move in this direction with this design, combining the tagomost with this epic gold hat, I want to pay special attention to my use of these inspirations. As easy and as common as it would be to engage with fantasy as being purely escapist, the truth is that at the core of this and all my designs is based on my understanding of the real world and history, an understanding tainted by my own existence in the imperial core. All art is political, there is genuinely no escaping that fact, so in borrowing from these real-world contemporary cultures, I feel the need to at the very least approach these designs from a point of cultural appreciation. Connected to this concept is that of Orientalism, a term describing a Western European field of thought and artistic movement from the 19th century, which patronizingly depicts cultures from the Middle East, North Africa, and Asia as being backwards, exotic, and lesser than European cultures. This understanding of the term was established in 1978 by Palestinian-American academic and activist Edward Said in his book Orientalism. While much work from this period is, I think, quite technically beautiful and interesting, there exists an undertone of maliciousness with these pieces. These cultures shown were going through the same technological advancements and political upheaval the rest of the world was going through at the same time. However, in these pieces, they're shown as unchanging and stagnant. Regal, yes, but in a backhanded and falsely medieval way that contrasted with an increasingly industrialized Western world. Now, this might all be a bit of an overreaction, as at its core this really is just a video about goblins, though that being said, I do think it's beneficial as an artist to take a step back at any point and critically examine anything you're creating. With that, we're ready to start work on the color. As I get deeper into this piece, having settled on a pretty solid base design, I'm entering a stage of fleshing out what I have. I like the idea of having this fella's chest be bare amidst all these robes and pieces of golden armor. It's a really fun piece of symbolism, I think. This guy is so powerful that he refuses to protect the most vulnerable part of his body, because he truly has nothing to fear. On his chest he has these really intricate designs in red, mirroring those on his armor, and including a simplified depiction of Shalnatish. I imagine these aren't painted on, but carved into his skin as a form of scarification, or even more gruesomely, burnt into his skin by the power of the sun, using mud or something to block out the negative space between the lines. I imagine these sunburnt designs would bear great power, granting him strength or even protecting him from the deadly notice of his god, a type of deific sunblock. This concept of a ritualized sunburning to grant powers is an idea I've been playing around with for several years at this point, and I'll definitely be using it more in the future. For his armor pieces, I ended up making them appear more bronze-like than gold. Gold, as one of the main properties that makes it valuable, does not oxidize and as such does not tarnish. This is cool, of course, but I really wanted to incorporate that type of aging, making it seem that he has existed wearing this armor for hundreds, potentially thousands of years. Bronze, however, does tarnish, and when it does, it gets this really cool-looking greenish, gray-blue color that I think will look really cool contrasting the red of his robes. Now, Ah-al-Ahim, Herald of the Sun, is also known as the Bright Blade. My first thought was to use brightness to emphasize the sharpness of his sword, maybe the glinting of light on its razor edge. Then I remembered this is a literal demigod, so we'll need to go a bit further than that. I made his blade a shard of light, a ray of the sun in physical form, so powerful and hot that it makes the air around it burst into flame. The hilt is bronze, ornamented in that same style as his armor, while also bearing more inspirations from Tuareg weaponry with that big blocky crossguard and prominent pommel pieces. For the background, I went very stark and almost surreal, such a bright landscape with this really dark sky. I wanted the scene to look very alien, like he exists in a different realm, one much closer to the light of the sun. Almost like it doesn't take place on the same planet as the rest of Goberland. And with that, we should be at the end of this design, and ready to hear the tale of the Bright Blade. Ah-al-Ahim, whose blade is bright, herald of the infinite and indifferent blood-red sun, the golden and terrible devil god Shal-Natish, a god who glimpsed eternal divinity through lidded eyes and retained selfhood. In the distant past, the bright blade once, too, was mortal. He traveled the low deserts and the blowing wastelands of the south, guiding herds to water, just as untold generations of his foregobs. During a great dust storm, one of his caprine charges broke loose and became lost in the rocky heights of a lone, towering spire. Alone, he climbed through jagged stone and thorny brush, ascending to the peak. At the top, he surfaced out of the storm, looking out at what appeared to be a vast tan sea stretching to the horizon. Eddies and currents of wind stirred the dust, bits of mica within reflecting colorful in the light of the noon sun. His eyes followed the light upwards, removing his veil to gaze upon the fire disk in the sky. Within that blazing eye, he saw through to a realm beyond, and the golden sun gazed back. In that moment of deific notice, he burst into flame. However, even as his retinas burned and what remained of his eyes ran down his face like tears, as his soul was drawn towards that blazing void, he dedicated himself to them, to Shal-Natish in entirety. Why they stayed their hand is unknown, but Ah-al-Ahim was released from their attention, and as such saved from utter destruction. A cosmic being of this scale should have no capacity for mercy, so the only explanation for his survival must be mere celestial chance. Ah-al-Ahim could not escape unscathed, however, and indeed many believed him perished, for his body was found atop that spire, a shriveled husk scorched from the inside, the sigil of the golden god branded on his chest. Months later, a reclusive colony of high mountain augurs began to dream of a white landscape underneath a dark sky, an unnaturally large sun blistering the land with heat greater than any forge. Even as the augurs' forms crumpled and knelt, flesh sticking and peeling from white-hot stone, a figure would approach. Barefoot, yet uncowed by the strength of the sun, garbed in the flowing robes of the southern Urg, wielding a blade like a ray of light. The air was so thin to be essentially non-existent, yet the figure spoke in a powerful basso, ordering the augurs to spread word of his survival, and the inevitable doom his god shall bring. When they awoke, they found the truth of their experience and the herald's words in the horrible burns and blisters that covered their bodies. They gathered and together raised sunburnt arms in supplication to the covenant of the blazing sun, the promise of global destruction by a fiery hand, in the hope that they, like the herald Ah-al-Ahim, might be saved. The bright blade still resides there in that field of white all these centuries later. In that moment of encompassing notice, his mortality had burned away, leaving only a shell that was pulled into a realm closer to Shal-Natish. Many wonder exactly where this land of heat and light is. The liturgical consensus remains that it is a border realm to the farthest dimension where the power of Shal-Natish resides. Modern academics, however, speak of a newly discovered planet, a small, pale orb circling closer to the sun than any other body in the system. It was cursorily named the Herald after the figure of legend, though some have started to believe this name is more appropriate than previously thought. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to support me doing these videos, I'd appreciate it if you could drop a like and a follow. If you'd like to support me more directly, I'd be quite grateful if you could throw me a few bucks on my store or on my Patreon. The links for both will be in the description below. Thank you so much.